Good morning, everybody. I am Ernesto Burden, the publisher of New Hampshire Business Review, and I am happy to be here today with Jeff Stutzman, CEO of Trusted Internet. And we are going to be talking about the how to protect your business in the current extreme landscape of cyber threats. Jeff has led cybersecurity in the U.S. Department of Defense, as well as large defense and technology companies, and he brings a wealth of firsthand in the trenches knowledge of defending against ransomware, rootkits, and botnets, and the criminals in countries that deploy them to this webinar. So having had a chance to talk with Jeff on multiple occasions about this, I can tell you are in for a fascinating and informative presentation, and also a fairly entertaining one. So Jeff, welcome. It's great to see you again.
Thank you very much.
With that, I'm going to pass the presentation right over to you, and we will be able to dive in.
Sounds good. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Stutzman. Nice to see you again, and let's just get right into this. So listen, you can't go a day without seeing one of these headlines in the news or hearing somebody talk about a data breach or a holiday scam or whatever. So how does this happen? Let me just give you a little short lesson in the mechanics of what happens when you surf the web, right? So I'm going to start at my house in Wilton, and I'm going to go out to Amazon.com. And I could do this with any different one. And what you're looking at is basically a trace of all of the things that the packet from my computer has to go through to set up an encrypted session on Amazon. So I'm going to leave my house. This is the modem, and I'm going to get to my provider, Tellink, and then I'm going to finally get to Amazon. And I have to go through every one of these nodes, which is typically a server or a router or a switch or something, until I finally get to Amazon. And when I get to Amazon, my encrypted session is set up. What does that mean? You get the little padlock in your browser that says that you're encrypted and safe. And if it doesn't, of course, you get the red X. Here's the problem. Everything that I do between here and here, until that encrypted session is set up, the first time is unencrypted. So if you're going out to a website and it's not HTTPS or that little padlock, everything that happens here is unencrypted until you put in your username and password. Some of them, I mean, you still have to make it all the way out there that first time to do it, but you're not going to put in a username and password. But so in this case, I have to go through about 5 things before I even hit Amazon's front door. And then I have to get to go through about another dozen before I finally get to the end, the website, and I set up that encrypted session. So during every one of these little nodes, these stops, these switch or whatever, your browser information is being collected, your geolocation potentially, your address, everything that you've got, your IP address, and there's nothing encrypted until I finally get out to Amazon and get that set up. That's a big deal. Starting from here, getting out there, first time, I'm going to go through 15 different things that have the ability to look and talk and look and see and collect a whole bunch of different things about me. Now, what happens when I do that all day long, right? So I sit and I work at a computer, and this is what's going on. I mean, there are about 1 million ways here where I'm going from my little house to all of these different things. And this was only, what, 5 or 6 different clicks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So imagine, how many opportunities you have to lose some of your information about you, targeting information that people can use to come back to you later as you go through the day. So lots and lots of ways for you to become a target for fraud, ransomware, malware, identity theft, you name it. And so this is, kind of the mechanics of it, right? This is bad architecture. Now, this is taken right out of the installation guide of this particular wireless router, and I could substitute a switch or a different device for this, and it could be a business, or actually in small businesses, this is what we see a lot: internet, cable modem, and then some kind of a router or wireless device. This is horribly bad infrastructure and horribly bad architecture, and here's why. So this is taken, I took it last night. It looks at 1 week, March 23rd to the 30th, of all of the different activities that we see coming off of sensors that we have, sensors meaning firewalls, that we have deployed. And you see these four things that I've highlighted. These are called botnets, robot networks. They're basically high-speed robot networks that when you pull the trigger on them, they go and go forever. And I'm going to put a visual in your head, and it's going to explain perfectly what these things do, right? You've gone swimming probably in a public pool with children, and you know that those children are going to pee in the pool. And it's not malicious, but it's going to go everywhere. But think about what it would be if an adult went into the pool with malicious intent and said, I'm going to pee in this pool because everybody that gets into it from this point forward is going to be touching that, and it's going to touch them, and it's going to get in every corner of the pool, and there's no way that it'll ever get out. So forever and ever and ever, everybody that pees in this pool is going to be touched by, or everybody that swims in this pool is going to be touched by me. Well, that's the way a botnet works. Somebody pulls the trigger on it the first time, and it runs and runs and runs forever and ever and ever. It's going to touch every computer that's exposed to the internet. It's going to test every computer to see if it could get in. And when it does, it's going to phone back to the person who released it. And it's going to say, okay, I'm in. What do you want me to do? And it's going to get instructions that are oftentimes automated. Collect the usernames and passwords from the web browser. Send them to this address. In fact, that's what this one does, Blada Bindi. So this is a botnet that runs forever and ever and ever. And when it gets in, it's going to steal the credentials out of your browser, and it's going to send them back to somebody else. So if you're one of those people that stores it, that's what's going to happen. Zero access botnet. This started out actually as a Bitcoin miner, but it is a rootkit. It automatically will compromise a computer that it finds that it can get into, and it will send things back. And it gets loaded in the master boot record on your computer, not necessarily in the Windows operating system. So your antivirus will generally not see this. Ghost is a RAT, a remote access Trojan. It will automatically compromise your computer. It is a Chinese cyber espionage tool that's been running around the world since about 2009. And so it's been there for a long time. Blada Bindi, same thing. Mirai has been out there. Oops, I forgot to update. We'll talk about that one in a minute. Mirai is the one that Dyn had a problem with a few years back. It took down a whole bunch of the domain name servers and whatever else. This goes after Internet of Things devices, as does Rotojakiro. This is actually a Vietnamese tool. It's down below here. It's probably like number 19 or 20, but it's a Vietnamese cyber espionage tool that was originally built to go after the ships at sea in the South China Sea, and it's spread around the world. So these things, just remember that blue cloud. That's what's going on. These botnets, they get released into the wild. They run, 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 run. They never get brought out. It can never be cleaned out. And there's more and more of these being delivered into the internet every single day. Ransomware is really changing. And one of the things that we see with that architecture is that there's really not a way for those, those cable modems or those wireless devices to be able to protect against some of the changes that we're seeing in ransomware, right? So one delivery of ransomware might look different than another, and maybe they're going to come in over an open port like HTTPS, right? It's going to come in through a known place, and it's going to look like a normal piece of software, but once it gets in, you're going to find out very quickly it's not a good piece of software. And so what you're looking at here, this is $100,000 in Bitcoin. We did a response for an oil and gas company, an engineering company in Houston about 4 years ago, and we ended up negotiating a ransom, and it was good. They were on day 4 of being down, so they were losing a lot of money. They'd stopped trading on the NASDAQ, and we were able to get them back, but we had to pay the ransom. Look, if you get hacked at work, you're going to get hacked at home too. It's the way it is. If you're a target at work, you're going to be a target at home. And oftentimes now, as telecommuters are working, the same computers are used. And so it's not hard to target them. In this case, the wireless router was overwritten by a keystroke logger, meaning it captures usernames and passwords every time you enter them into the internet. So think about banking, for example, or just going into anything. You want to log into New Hampshire Business Review with a username and password, right? They're going to steal that. And then they're going to take pictures of everything that you do while you're using that username and password. In this case, this is the number 2 in a money firm out in Orange County. Big deal. She's a big deal. And she actually did a voice blog about what we did for her. But she had the wireless router overwritten, and it captured her banking credentials, and then it captured her account numbers, and then she called the bank, or they called the bank and said, well, we've got an account number, we've got all of that home address and all that kind of stuff. Then they stole her telephone number and ported it over from Verizon to Google. So when the bank called to confirm the transaction, they had the phone number. She lost $82,000 in 3 weeks' time. And so we were able to go back, help her file a LifeLock, rewired her house, and we worked as her virtual chief information security officer for about 3 years after that. What about, things that are need protecting, like the Nest cameras, or those Ring devices, or the thermostats, or whatever, right? So we responded to a home up on Lakeshore Drive in just north of Chicago. And it was because they wanted to have an assessment done. So we were looking at the house, and we do a lot of billionaire family homes, executive homes, all high net worth. So I said to this woman, was there a problem? Why did you call us? And she says, well, she said, I was in the kitchen the other day and somebody started talking to me through the camera system. And I said, oh, okay. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it. And she said, the first thing I did was call my husband, and he said, get out of the house. And so when I put down the phone and started to get out of the house, the guy on the camera said, don't forget your purse. It's on the counter next to the whatever. And so that was it. And so there are, this is kind of a big deal when those camera systems and thermostats and all of those are exposed directly to the internet. There are a lot of scanners out there that are looking for those devices specifically to be able to log in. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But what else is at risk? I mean, you've heard the stories about businesses all over the place, point of sale systems. I can tell you horror stories about that, home offices, all that kind of stuff. One on the bottom left you probably have never thought about, right, is the manufacturing facilities. We do a lot of work in manufacturing, we call it operational technologies, but these things are controlled by something, usually a computer, or a slimmed down computer, and it's probably Windows or something like that, and these things get compromised. All of a sudden, that production line stops, right? So I worked at a facility we had 65 plants that did nothing more than build these PC boards, had robots putting chips on PC boards. And if those robots went down for a couple of hours, the money lost was significant, right? Or camera systems, that's like a no-brainer for us. We deploy into a facility, and usually the first thing that we see that's been hacked is the camera system or the video recorder. And then of course on the bottom right is, look, I mean, this is a gamer, obviously, but the fact is we've got a lot of companies out there that just let their employees surf the web. Hey, you bored? Go out and surf the web. No big deal. You guys are getting hacked. We got you. What about at home, right? We talked a little bit about this, but literally, every single thing now in these smart homes, from a garage door opener to lighting, or I talked to somebody yesterday that's installing a Lutron system to be able to pull the curtains for the home. Crazy smart home, lighting systems, everything else. Here's the deal. If this thing is compromised and you can see it on your phone, there's a high probability that somebody else can see it on your phone too. So think about the fact that somebody can grab the credentials for your garage door opener, your lighting system, your cameras, whatever, through that wireless device, that unprotected device. They can see when you're home. They don't have to sit across the road in your driveway and watch. They can see it from wherever they are. They can turn the lights on. They can deactivate alarms. They can open garage doors. It looks just normal to the people who are doing the monitoring. So that's a big deal. And then of course, insider threat, right? So everybody hears about this, but you really don't know what it means probably, right? So every salesman who leaves a company leaves with a Rolodex. Every IT person who's privileged, if they're upset, they're a higher risk of doing something to a company or stealing data. And so there's a, the physical theft of walking off with a laptop, which we see all the time, but also the electronic threat of somebody who's upset they didn't get the raise this year, they're going to another company, they're upset with the boss. We all have them. I've had them. But that's one of the big things that we see. This is a big deal right now, and I know that we're going to probably have a short conversation about this at the end, but collateral damage is one of the big things that we see that comes through that little architecture that we talked about. There's really not a good way to protect it. Here's the deal, right? When I talk about being able to get to a computer, this is what it looks like. I can look at webcams. I can have an exposed administrator account. I can do whatever, right? And there's go up to Shodan right now. There are almost 1 million. Well, this is a little dated, but there are like 1 million of these things that we can look at. Camera systems, I can watch it remotely because it's exposed to the internet. Now, here's what we're looking at. This is kind of a big deal. Ernesto and I were having a little conversation about this before, but this is what Ukraine looked like last night at about 10 o'clock as I was updating the slide deck. These red dots are computers that are open to the internet and potentially available for an attack. All these red dots, and there are 1.9 million of these things, and there you go. So I just gave you the lesson in HTTP, right? So all of those computers are typically exposed. These are also unencrypted, these DNS devices down here, the servers. So right off the bat, there are ways to be able to go in and find vulnerabilities. Now, here's the problem. In the last year, we've seen attacks against these nodes increase by 250%. And in the last quarter, in Q1 of 23, there have been a ton of neighboring countries, Montenegro, Moldova, Poland, the Nordic countries, Sweden, Germany. They're all reporting significant hacks coming out of collateral damage from the war. Or maybe they're being targeted because they're being viewed as supportive to Ukraine. Here's the problem. In the US, now this is a bigger map, so the red dots look a little bit smaller, but as of last night at about 10 o'clock, there were 480 million exposed computers. Do you think for a second that the botnets that are being launched out of Crimea against Ukraine are going to discriminate for even 1 second and say, oh, you're a US computer, I shouldn't attack you? No, I don't think so. And in fact, we've got some this is an interesting thing here. I cut this off, I guess, but HTTP, HTTPS, these are exposed web interfaces on a cable modem with default usernames and passwords. So there are 10,713,000 computers out there where the web interface for the cable modem is exposed. So this is a really big deal, right? We're going to see that bleed over coming in, and if you've got an unprotected environment, there's a little bit of a problem. Now, this is a little bit dated. This was Q3 22, but it just talks about who's most at risk. Lots of different industries, but public administrative, defense, social, those guys are getting hit with ransomware all over the place, right? We've been submitting proposals to these little towns all over the place because they need protection against ransomware. But you can look down the list. What's the motivation? Malware, which is ransomware. Unknown. Account takeover. Why? I just showed you why. It's easy to do. And it's all because of this architecture that comes default as the setup for almost everything that you buy that goes into your home or small business. So who are we, and why should you maybe put down your telephone and stop chasing emails? We're a managed security service provider headquartered out of New Boston, New Hampshire. Now the company's got people scattered around the world, but we're headquartered right outside the Air Force Base in New Boston, and we're commonly known as an MSSP or an MDR, Managed Detect and Respond, or now we've become a bit of an XDR, Expanded Detect and Respond, which means we can bring in all kinds of different logs. We're also top 250 MSSP. This is around the world top 250 MSSPs in the world. We're usually in the, we're in the top 250. And we have clients that we service from London to Sydney, Bogota to Toronto. And bottom line is we run a 24/7, always on concierge cybersecurity monitoring and protection service. We cater to small businesses. Most of our clients are under 50 employees. We take care of the executives for those companies, high net worth families, family offices, a lot of defense industrial based manufacturing. This is me. You can go check me out on LinkedIn. Former Navy intelligence officer, done a lot of really fun stuff. Good looking too. But here's my team, right? This is more important than me. So this is who actually runs the business, and Rochelle is on here, and I need to update that and put her on because she's become very important. But Nate Paddock runs cybersecurity services for us. I hired Nate out of Dartmouth, known him for a while, but Nate used to run the Air Force SOC, the Security Operations Center for the Air Force, and he's a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. Paul runs, he's a part-timer for us, but Paul runs IT for the University of Arizona, and he is a retired Army National Guard E9. Roger Roulette used to be Nate's boss in the Air Force. Lou is kind of an institution in Southern New Hampshire. Used to be the CISO for Skillsoft, just came on with us, and now he's one of our virtual CISOs. Sajal is a rock star. Sajal runs the Security Operations Center for us. She's our director of security for that, and she is in Singapore. Mark lives in Bedford, and we hired him out of Convenient MD, and he's one of the best. LaShawn, straight out of the Navy, 6 months ago. She's also very much a mechanic down in Atlanta, and she runs projects for us. And right now we have a vacancy for our insider threat team. Hopefully that'll come up soon. But here's the deal, right? As an MSSP, we focus only on security. I tell people, if your printer's out of ink, don't call me, I don't care. But if your printer's phoning home to Russia from the spooler, that's something interesting to us, and we're gonna jump in. But we built the company on the idea that we wanted highly educated people in the SOC and in the operation, and using really smart tools, and that's what we've done. So about 80% of my people have master's degrees. We've got 10 years of experience on average in large enterprise. So a deep bench of large enterprise experience. A lot of diversity in the way that we built the company. All kinds of professional certificates, 9 CISSPs. Actually, I think we have 4 CISAs auditors, and then we are a registered provider for CMMC, the NIST 800-171 stuff that all of the contractors have to go through. I should put the updated logo in, I forgot, but that's all right. Our clients are small. We have about 80 customers, again, from London to Sydney, Bogota to Toronto, all over the US, defense companies, families, family offices, investment shops. We've got a bunch. So here's the deal. You've kind of understood what the threats are now. So given you a once over on that. I've shown you what bad architecture looks like. So I'm going to show you now, I'm going to give you like Security 101. This is how you build good stuff, right? So the mission is, you've got to figure out how to protect your, whatever it is, your house, your apartment complex, your office, whatever, from ransomware is the #1 threat that you're going to face. Email-based attacks, automated high-speed botnets, espionage, keystroke loggers, anything else that's going to be thrown at you. There are thousands and thousands of things that are going to get thrown at you. So how do you do that? Here's #1. This is a firewall. A firewall is nothing more than a fence around your computer. It's really that's all it is. It's exactly the same. Now the problem is, you notice there's no way to get in and out to the computer. So how does this computer, communicate out? Well, you've got to open doors. And so for that, we open a web port at port 80 for the web. We open port 25 or whatever it is for the email, file transfer, SSLs at 443, databases, whatever they are. But the problem is that there are 65,000 doors that are opening, and then you've got a whole bunch of temporary doors that are going to open and close at any given time. So this becomes really messy, right? So the next thing that you want is this thing it's basically it's an intrusion prevention system, but basically it's a bouncer and a dog that are looking at everything that comes through the firewall to make a determination as to whether or not it's good. So the bouncer's going to check the list and see if you're on the list. And if you're not on the list, you're going to have to go through the pat down, and the dog is going to sniff you out for bombs and viruses and bugs and whatever. And then, if they're satisfied, they're going to let you through. And if they're not satisfied, you go back, probably on your head. They're going to bounce you. And so sometimes you're going to have things that are actually going to make it through. And that's, of course, a little coronavirus, right? But sometimes you're going to have things come through. And what happens if the bouncer and the firewall let your brother come through, and you're having Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, and all of a sudden he sneezes on your food, everybody gets sick, right? So you've got to have something that's going to prevent everybody from getting sick once it comes in. And sure enough, that's going to be antivirus. So you've got firewalls, intrusion prevention, you've got antivirus, and there are some other things in here that I'm not going to go into, DNS and all kinds of monitoring and filtering, but that's what you're seeing so far. Now, what happens as that brother gets older, or maybe he gets in a car accident, and he's got a big scar on his face or something like that? You've got to know what that person that's coming through the firewall, and what are they going to look like, or what are the threats going to look like? And that's what we use to train the bouncer and the dog, right? Cyber threat intelligence is how we track what these threats are doing. How are they coming in? What ports should we expect them on? What doors? What do they look like when they come in? How do they behave when they come in? What are they actually looking for? And then we can train all of these defenses to know what the current threats look like. And what about in the cloud or email? It's no different, right? So if you're deploying in the cloud, don't make the mistake of thinking the cloud is going to protect you. They're just somebody else's computers that you're renting. And so for that, we have tools like Avalon and Proofpoint and Mimecast that can look at the email, and all of the firewalls that you could buy today. Most of them you could buy a virtual firewall, and you can put it in, and it will work just like a physical device. So here's what it looks like in real life, right? This is what our baseline architecture looks like, and we're going to start right here, right? You want a firewall. So in a small business, this is what we use. It's a FortiGate 60F Foxtrot. It's about that big, and we put it between your cable modem and probably your wireless device. And that firewall, it's got the intrusion prevention system built in, right? The bouncer and the dog. It's got antivirus built in, so it can look at that stuff that's coming in or leaving your network to make sure that it's clean. It's got DNS monitoring. It's got cyber threat intelligence, and a whole lot more. On every computer, you want to have antivirus, right? And we also use something called anti-evasion. It's an anti-ransomware tool that basically says if anything tries to bypass security on your computer, this other tool will automatically kill it. And so we've had so much success with that tool. We had a company in Boston that got a call from the FBI at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The FBI told them that they were going to have a ransomware event at midnight that night. And just before their payroll run, we deployed this anti-evasion tool while I got somebody in a car. Nate drove down from, I think, Dartmouth at the time. But we sent them an email with this thing, and they started loading it up across the board. And at midnight, when the thing started to try to execute, we were able to kill it before it executed. So it's just this really nice thing, and it's just a really good complement to antivirus. But you want something on every computer and every mobile. Virtual private networks, for God's sakes, please, please, please don't ever use a free VPN service. There's some really good ones out there, right? You can use Nord, you can use any of those kinds of guys, but we also offer one for the same price that comes in through a firewall in Northborough, Massachusetts, and it's monitored 24/7. But look, these free services, they have to pay for servers somehow. How do you think they do that? They sell information about you. It's that simple. If they're not renting you something, or they're not selling you a service for a couple of bucks a month or 10 bucks a month or whatever it is, they're selling for you, so selling your stuff. So don't use a free VPN service. Physical security. This is like one of my favorites because we actually go in and we protect physical security systems, network video recorders, AI, surveillance tools, cameras. Those things operate typically in an unencrypted way. So we go in, we put them behind firewalls, we set them all up, we reconfigure them and make them protected. We do the stuff in the cloud as well. We've got a group down in DC that we work with a lot, that we've actually built out their architecture, so they have to come in through an encrypted way. But and also now, if you do any work for the government, you're not allowed to use Hikvision or Huawei or what's the other one? I forget the couple, but there are like 6 different systems now that have been banned from use, even in defense contractor environments. Of course, the number one way to lose an account or have somebody get in is by stealing your credentials, right? So we always recommend 2-factor authentication. This is I don't typically like DHS Intel, but this is a really good piece. So I did use it. We use Cisco Duo for 2-factor authentication. It's available on most banks, right? They're gonna force you to use something where they're going to send you an SMS that's going to come back to your telephone, and you want to punch in that 6-digit code that they send you. Most people are just pushing that. Email threats, same thing. We plug into the back end of O365 or Google, and there's a lot of stuff out there. We use Avanan, but Proofpoint is really good as well. Mimecast is another good one. You want to be able to plug in, scan email before it comes in. So before we started this, Ernesto had emailed me his deck because we were having a little difficulty getting the thing going, and it took like 5 minutes to come in, but that was because it was scanning every single thing in that email to find out if it was good or bad before it hit my inbox. So I'd rather take a couple of minutes of time to let this thing scan and get clean before it comes in than just to take it and okay. And then, of course, I talked about, this is kind of a new thing for us. I talked about now we're expanded, detect, and respond. What does that mean? Well, that means I can plug in all kinds of different things. So if I can plug in physical networks into my information security stack and figure out if somebody was badging in or whatever, there's a really good way to correlate all of these things. So if you're virtualized, if you're using Docker containers, if you have infrastructure as a service, if you've got web application firewalls, I can bring all of this into one common operating picture now at a fairly reasonable price, and I can correlate all of it. It used to be I could correlate just the firewalls and the endpoints and maybe some authentication, but this is a really big deal for more advanced threats. And then of course training, and that's what I use in homes. So I keep a house in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia for when I work with clients down here. I've been running the company out of Harpers Ferry for a couple of years because my wife is an RN at one of the local hospitals, and she's been busy on the COVID floor. And now after COVID, of course, she's still working a lot. But my house down here is protected just like this. My house in New Hampshire protected just like this. It's the same architecture that we put in for companies. And then when somebody comes to me, this is what I always recommend. So look, here's some key takeaways, right? The threats really: ransomware, business email compromise, physical security systems are always compromised. Smart home systems are almost always compromised. And then personal cybersecurity. So the key points: number one, productivity is always cheaper than instant response. Insurance will give you money, but it's not going to give you your data back. And it's not going to help you with the frustration and burnout of your staff. And your business could still go under. You'll have some money in your pocket, but anyway, physical security systems are almost always compromised. They're almost never considered, but they're almost always targeted. And typically when they get targeted, they get hacked. Defense in depth doesn't have to be expensive to be effective, right? The firewall that I pointed you at, if you had to buy it at MSRP, it's about $2,700. If you buy something else, they're less expensive. We use that one because it's a commercial grade product, and it gives us the knobs and buttons that we can use to defend when we need to. But this whole thing is relatively inexpensive. Hardware and software in total, maybe you're paying $3,000 and then a subscription fee to have somebody monitor it. Not a big deal. Know your tools, right? You go out and you buy something off the internet and you plug it in, or you're an IT person or security person. One of the things that you can do is learn how to use your tools. So you could plug something in, but if it's not managed or it requires updates or whatever. So these FortiGates have had 2 vulnerabilities which expose VPN credentials right in the last 2 months. And the only thing you have to do to defend against them is know how to do the updates and manage the thing best, and put those updates in and it'll take care of it. We've been doing that throughout. If you don't do that in your home, your firewall is going to be less and less effective over time. So you've got to know how to use your tools. And then last, have a plan. What if something happens? Tabletop it. I mean, if you don't know how to do that, call us and we can walk you through that. But tabletop it, and those exercises go a really long way. So again, what is this? Bad architecture. What is this? It's good architecture. Isolate the internet from your internal network, whether it's in your home or your business. Why? Automated threats never stop. They can't be put back. They'll touch every computer that they're exposed to on the internet, and bad guys will target networks without any protection, and it's an automated thing. And your basic cable modem and wireless can't protect you from either. Questions?
Wow, Jeff. Certainly an amazing amount of information to terrify casual
I
users of the
teach.
internet. Teach. No, I agree with you. I agree. Knowledge is power, and in this case, you certainly presented a lot of it. So thank you. And also, I think a lot of practical solutions that I think people will find comforting when you're talking about $3,500 or $3,000 as an investment, in a piece of technology like the firewall that you showed. That seems like a lot until you consider the potential pain that you could be feeling.
$82,000 in 3 weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. Well, anyway, thank you. You did mention during your presentation that there was one thing that we talked about before we started this that we thought we'd take a minute and just touch on, which was your sort of outlook on what's happening next. What are the future dangers, both in terms of geopolitical situations and in terms of technology? So we specifically mentioned what's happening in the Ukraine right now, but then also ChatGPT and tools like that.
Yeah, well, all right. So let's talk about the geopolitical first. I mean, number one, Ukrainian defensive on the cyber side has been just beaten to death by Russian hackers since about 2014. I mean, they're hardened. So you're not hearing a lot about that in the news unless you're somebody like me that's tracking on that. But the fact is that the Russians drained bank accounts before the presidential election. They broke into the election the central election computer system. They did all kinds of stuff, and it's been a constant barrage of cyber activity. Ukraine has become kind of like the shooting range for Russian hackers to go live on before they go anywhere else for a number of years. So we're seeing that, but the Ukrainian community are some of the best in the world, not only at defense but also at offense. And right now, with tensions in Israel and the things going on there, the Israelis, I mean, we use a lot of Israeli products because they're brilliant, and so they've got some of the smartest computer minds in the world, defense and offense. The Russians have been going at this the whole time, right? And now we're going to start to see more and more coming out of China and Taiwan. And then, of course, other folks are jumping into the mix, right? So the IRGC and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has got their own computers, folks, and we're seeing those jump into the mix. So the volume of activity and the sophistication is only going to grow. And so as we're shagging flies and knocking these things down, the sophistication is going to change as needed, and we're going to just see that escalation. And I think that's what's coming. But ChatGPT is a really good example. I mean, look, that's an open source AI tool. Now, I use AI-based defenses in some of the things that we do, and most of us do. But the fact is, don't think for a second that those tools aren't being built into offensive tools as well, right? Absolutely, they are. It would be absolutely, you shouldn't, It would be criminal to not think about the fact that, I can go to ChatGPT and ask it to write a poem in Shakespearean English, and it'll do that like that, right? So I wrote a piece a few years back about this tool called Bees with Machine Guns. And basically what it is you could set up microservers in the cloud and you could program them to attack, targets, 200 attacks at a time. But they were all fairly static and they were, good for testing. But now add in the idea that you've got artificial intelligence and the social engineering becomes very real. That email that you get becomes very real. And at the same time, that OpenAI or that AI engine is looking at your computer in a very cognitive way or a simulated cognitive way, and it's trying to figure out how to worm its way through your defenses and be undetected. So I think we're seeing that, and I would say, if I had to rub the bald spot on my head and wish for luck and kind of think of forethought, I'm going to say 6 months to a year. I don't think it's that far out. And I think it's going to become harder and harder to defend, especially with the volume and the AI that we're seeing. I think that's a big deal.
Well, thank you, Jeff. On that note, that which only seems to underscore the need for being cognizant of the threats and also paying attention to what kind of defenses that people are building into their networks, both at their small businesses and at home. I think the importance cannot be overstated, right?
Yeah.
Well, as always, fascinating and informative. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Stutzman. Thank you to Trusted Internet for sponsoring this. I'm Ernesto Burden, the publisher of New Hampshire Business Review. Thank you all for watching, and we appreciate you.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care.